Remember who it was?
George Washington.
George Washington. And then we had to write Great Britain and tell her why we're doing this. So I was the one asked to write the necessity for taking up arms, and it was rather harsh. They slapped my wrist. They gave it to Mr. Dickinson to complete, and then they said, now, Mr. Jefferson, you write an olive branch petition. We want to reconcile. We want to maintain peace. So, citizens, we sent both of these to England. Anyone remember the reply of the Crown that winter of 75 and 76? Anyone recall how England answered them?
Did he not reply?
Say it loud, ma'am.
I think he didn't reply at all.
That England did not reply at all. Give her a round of applause. She wasn't going to deign and reply to that mongrel, radical, rabble population in the wilderness of North America. Absolutely not. She wouldn't let us be represented in Parliament. We had no votes. No. But we read the reply. It was printed on the front page of the London newspapers. The colonies are now officially in a state of rebellion. And so the British troops began to sail to North America. Well, you can well understand now, in the spring of 1776, our work was at hand. We now needed to decide whether we were crossing the Rubicon. And Virginia was the first to make a statement on it. On the 15th of May, 1776, in Williamsburg, Virginia, Virginia became the first of all of the colonies to secede from England on behalf of her sister colonies. Now, Rhode Island had seceded nearly a month before, but that was solely on behalf of herself. She didn't care a whit of her other colonies. But Virginia seceded on behalf of everyone, and we wrote that resolution for independence. It went up to Philadelphia. It was read in the Continental Congress on June 7th by Colonel Richard Henry Lee. These colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states. President Hancock then created the entire Congress as a committee of the whole to study the resolution of Virginia, see how it be relative to all of the states, and we would have to argue, debate, and vote on that resolution. And then he appointed another committee of 5 men to do what? 5 men to do what? To support the resolution of Virginia. What were we supposed to do? To write a Declaration of American Independence, should it be necessary. This was no fait accompli. We might not vote for independence. Anyone remember the names of the 5 men on the committee?
Adams.
John Adams.
Jefferson.
Thank you. Me.
Madison.
No, Madison had just arrived in Williamsburg. He wasn't up there. John Hancock, actually, because he was president, he was ex officio on the committee. That means he was legally on it, but he was not active. No, George Mason was still in Virginia. Benjamin Franklin, very good. 2 more. The gentleman from New York?
John Jay?
No, very good. No, not John Jay. Robert R. Livingston. And the gentleman from Connecticut?
Sherman.
Very good. Roger Sherman. Now you may realize, if you haven't before, I was the only one on the committee south of the line drawn by Messrs. Mason and Dixon. We met for the first time. The committee met at Dr. Franklin's house on June the 11th. And whom do you think we thought should take up the pen and write our declaration? Actually, no. I was not dry yet behind the ears. I was only 33.
Franklin?
Dr. Franklin. He was our elder. He was 70 years old. He had already been living in London a good 17 years. He was pleading our cause. And he was one of the wealthiest men in North America. You know how he made his money? He was a printer and a newspaper man. He knew the facts. I remember Dr. Franklin said, "Thank you for the honor, gentlemen, but as I grow older, I do not want to have anything else I write receive the scrutiny of a committee." And he looked at me at the same time Mr. Adams did. It was John Adams who said, "Gentlemen, I think Jefferson writes as well as anyone else. And besides that, a Virginian needs to be at the head of this business." Why?
Compromise.
Well, where did the business begin?
Virginia.
Right where you're all seated. Well, 120 miles to the east in Williamsburg. But in Virginia. And so there you are, citizens. The next day, June the 12th, I had rented 2 rooms on the 2nd floor of a newly built brick townhouse on the southwest corner of 7th and High Street in Philadelphia. They now call High Street Market Street. The house had been built a year earlier by a German immigrant, a bricklayer by the name of Jacob Graf. Still could not speak English. I went into that front room, the parlor, and I brought in my recently completed writing desk, this little compact writing desk. See, I'm very proud of it. It's got a drawer there with its papers and its quills, its ink. Some people refer to it as a slope because look at this. You can put it up on the slope, put it on your lap when you're in your carriage. Do some writing, read a book. On that table, I opened it up like this. Isn't that clever? My own design. And it was on this that I wrote what could have become our death warrant. What if we had lost? Not only me, but those other 55 individuals that signed our Declaration of American Independence. They would have been rounded up, brought to England in chains, tried for treason, and hanged at Tyburn Hill. Well, 7 of them would have gotten off because 7 died in the American Revolution. But I ask you this, can you erase the printed word? This would have still lived on. And that's what inspired me. That's what inspired me, and so it was. It took 3 days to write our declaration on 4 sheets of paper. Anyone know why it took me so long? 3 days. I'll tell you why. I'm guilty of something everyone here is guilty of.
Perfectionism.
Well, perfectionism. That has a lot to do with it, yes?
Writer's block?
No? 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 Citizens, I make mistakes. Is it easy to erase ink? No. So look what I had to do. I had to cross out what I wrote, write the correction above, beneath. I could hardly read my own jottings at the end of the day. And I'd spend time then transcribing it clean and clear that night. And then the next morning, I'd make more mistakes. But into this, I put man's eternal struggle for freedom. Mankind, the family of man, from time immemorial. There's nothing new or original in this. Nothing. That was not our business to come up with anything new or original. Our business was to resuscitate, to rejuvenate man's eternal struggle. Everything in this has all been written and argued and debated. You may find it in the elementary books of public right. The works of Aristotle, Cicero, Algernon Sidney, John Locke, those authors, their works, each and every one of you have read and reread frequently, do you not? No, you do not. I know you do not. Particularly if you remember, in 1776, many people could not even read. I had to write something that could be publicly read. Something that would be a dramatic piece to lift the human spirit to a noble sentiment of what man can accomplish in collaboration with his fellow man. I'm no playwright. I had to shed the lofty sophisms of these ancient authors, explain it in clear and simple terms and expression of the American mind, and place before the world the common sense of the matter. And that matter simply that our war was fought on behalf of the common man to provide the greatest good for the greatest number, to show the rest of the world that we had experienced in the diversity of our population our greatest strength, that the mass of mankind has not been born with saddles on their backs, nor a few booted and spurred ready to ride them. That is in our declaration. It's written in 3 parts. The first part is our promise to every succeeding generation, not only amongst ourselves, but to the world. The second part are our grievances, which we must never forget in the future. When a government tried to keep us down, tried to keep 13 individual nations separate from one and the other, to continue to bicker with one and the other, argue and debate. That's pure Machiavelli. Because then that keeps someone ultimately in control of the disagreements. Watch out for that. And the third, if you will, is our compact. E pluribus unum in perpetuity. Now what is our promise in that first part? Well, essentially, citizens, it's ancient Roman law. A foundation of our jurisprudence, the foundation of British common law, is simply the Justinian Code of Law, the first civil body of law provided for civilized man in the 6th century, written by Roman Emperor Justinian I. Anyone know the foundation, the basis of that code?
Hammurabi?
No. Who's Hammurabi? Never heard of him. Everyone is born free. Everyone. Everyone comes into this world with a right to their own person, to move wherever they choose to improve their condition. Now that was nearly forgotten through the ages of the darkest ignorance, truly. Had it not been for many a monk, many a scribe in their dark cells to transcribe that wisdom of the ancient world so it would be ready to be disseminated by the printing press. Everyone is born free. And remember, if you contest, well, what about the Roman slave citizens? The Roman slaves were white. It was voluntary. They put themselves into slavery. They were artists and teachers, men of scientific curiosity. The supportive element in the first 2 paragraphs of the Justinian Code is another Roman law, the law of mortmain and usufruct. Anyone know what that law is? Mortmain and usufruct. It's right here in clear and simple terms. The earth belongs to the living generation. The dead hold no power over us. Think about that. In my estimation, and as I continue to write, that means that we should not, the living generation, assume the debts of the past. That's not ours. The earth belongs to the living generation. Think about this more profoundly. No one has ever lived in the past. This is your world. There's the first paragraph. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, to alter, or to dissolve a government, that's your right. To make it more amenable to your safety, your protection, and particularly to protect and defend your natural rights. Those are the rights given to mankind not by any government, not by any ruler. They're given to man by nature, and nature's God. We're all born free in nature, though lamentably, we're born into the laws of man. There's the conflict. But this is what helps us to realize we can do something about it every successive generation. The conflict amongst the laws of man are explained in that second part, our grievances. Think about this as we were to suffer ourselves. He has dissolved our representative forms of government. He has dissolved our courts of justice. He has closed down our printing presses. He has made his judges dependent upon his will alone. Sound familiar? It ought to. Keep thinking about this. And then the third part, oh my heavens, the third part is our trust. The third part, the last sentence, the most important, our compact. And in support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our
Sacred fortune.
our fortunes, and our sacred
Honor.
honor. There's the trust, there's the faith in our government. It requires that. You have to remind yourself to have faith in our government means we have faith and trust in one another, because our government is a revelation of that. It's an ancient truth, as I have written. Should you discover anyone in government to be untrustworthy, to be unvirtuous, will they not be so in any walk of life? So if you condone it there, you may elect it to government. This is government of, by, and for the people. It begins with you. A government will be no more honest than you are. Ancient truths, ancient facts. When I finished, I handed it to the committee. The committee made corrections, particularly Adams. He was incessant. He kept correcting everything that I wrote. And then the committee handed it to the Continental Congress, and it was there for them to read and become acquainted with it as they voted for independency. Anyone remember the day we finally voted for independency, voted on the resolution of Virginia, the birthday of our nation? John Adams says we should remember it every year with masked bands, bonfires, parades.
July 2nd.
July 2nd. I want to give both of these gentlemen a round of applause on that. The 2nd of July. But then we had to argue and debate how we wanted the rest of the world to understand what we had done. Now, the lamentable thing is the vote for independence was one vote shy. It was not unanimous. You remember which colony abstained? Almost.
New York?
New York.
Yeah.
Very good. Absolutely. New York. Lewis Morris said he had to ride back to New York and get further instructions.
Right.
He did return and vote yes in favor of independence in mid-July. But this, of course, had an influence on the vote on the Declaration. And before our argument over the Declaration began, Mr. Edward Rutledge of South Carolina stood up and said, South Carolina moves, so long as one particular clause amongst our grievances remains, we will not vote to make this unanimous. And was seconded by Dr. Lyman Hall of Georgia. Anyone know what they objected to? Slavery, exactly. The clause I had written distinctly, that the king is a tyrant for ignoring our petitions to end the importation of slaves, for waging cruel war against a people who never did him any harm, for capturing these people, bringing them halfway about the globe, and subjecting them to indentured servitude for life. I got up and walked out. Now, many people have asked me, knowing of this, Mr. Jefferson, why did you not remain there? Why did you not argue and debate if you truly believe that slavery is wrong? Well, citizens, rest you assured, my writings, my jottings bear it up. Yes, it's wrong. It's an abomination unto our Creator. He cannot help but abhor the institution of slavery. And I worry when we begin to tremble because His justice will not sleep forever. Anyone know why I could not stand there and argue the defense of what I had written? I already mentioned it earlier.
The Southern economy?
No? Yes?
You are a very shy person.
Pardon me?
You're a very shy person.
No?
You have slaves.
No, many others did too, madam. Proper parliamentary procedure. That's how we abided as Englishmen. No one voice louder than another, no one individual above the law than the other. It was out of my hands when I gave it to the committee. That was it. It was out of the committee's hands when they gave it to the Congress. When I returned, that clause was expunged to maintain political unanimity. But this is what still allows us to keep that debate going. The citizens, as you know, we voted on our declaration on the 4th of July. And in conclusion, may I say, before I hear your questions, in conclusion, there's obviously a contradiction. But that is who we are. And we keep working at that. The contradiction, if you will, is what George Washington called our guarantee. And I believe it is too. The guarantee of our promise is our Constitution. How many of you know that the Constitution actually protects me and many of my neighbors in the ownership of enslaved? How can that be right? But there's resolution. The Constitution is open to amendment. It grows as we grow. Mind this, citizens. It's the shortest document of its kind in human history, creating a government to check its own power, and which of the three branches is the most influential?
Legislative.
Legislative branch. That branch elected by whom?
The people.
The people. It's supported in the first line in our Constitution, the most remarkable first line of any system of government. How does it begin?
All power.
We the people. We the people. Extraordinary. There's never been another line like that. Now look, if Mr. Adams were standing here with me, the two of us would lament something before you. That is the fact we'll live our entire lives only knowing one type of American to have a vote. So let me put it to you this way. Who here today will never have a vote or a voice in our government?
Women.
Women. No vote, no voice. Who else?
Enslaved.
Not only the enslaved, sir, anyone of color. Anyone of color. Mulattoes, the natives of this land, those of a particular hue from a foreign land who've come here to better their condition. No vote, no voice. Others?
People that don't own land.
Exactly. A white male, 21 years of age or older, who does not hold property, either real estate or of monetary value. Still others.
Read and write.
No? I wish education had something to do with it. It doesn't. A white male, 21 years of age or older, who holds property but is mortgaged. No vote, no voice. It's not your property. It belongs to whom? Well, your creditor, whomever that may be, and your creditor may be a wealthy woman of color. No matter her wealth, she has no vote, no voice. That's how it stands in all of our 23 states now that we've admitted Maine. Don't get me started about the territory of Missouri. The only one that I will ever know, Mr. Adams will ever know, that General Hamilton, General Washington ever knew to have a vote and a voice in our new government is the white male freeholder, 21 years of age or older. So I ask you, citizens, does that represent we the people?
No.
There's your work. There's your work, ladies. There's your work, everyone. Here's your promise. With every successive generation, this is what makes us American. Uniquely, on behalf of our family man across the globe. And mind you this, it used to be more restricted. Anyone remember what one of the other restrictions used to be? You had to be a white male freeholder, 21 years of age or older, who was Protestant Christian. Anyone know who changed that?
Carol.
Hmm?
Carol, the first
Charles Carroll and all of the papists in Maryland had to take an oath of allegiance to the Church of England if they wanted to vote as men of property. No, I would like to say that I changed it initially. I didn't, because freedom for religion was practiced in Pennsylvania and Rhode Island. But the Statute of Virginia for religious freedom changed it in Virginia and was the impetus for the First Amendment in our Constitution that followed. Well, thank you, citizens, for listening to those reflections. I hope I provoked you to think upon the matter. And for the time we have left, Ms. Quinlan, do I have any time for questions, curiosities?
Sure, if you want to do just a little bit.
All right,
We're a little bit over, but